Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Simon Fowler, CEO of Empowering People Group, and I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting the latest session in our Labour Laws series. Before we get started, here's just a quick overview of who we are and why we're here today. EPG consists of 4 innovative tech-led companies that are on a mission to really simplify employee experiences and empower people to drive business success. Today, we're continuing our Labour Laws series and delving into how the new Day 1 rights proposed in the Employee Rights Bill requires an evolution of probation period processes. At the end of this session, we intend to have simplified what this means for businesses and provided practical expert guidance on what you need to prepare. Although the changes aren't coming into law until 2026, it's absolutely imperative to start preparing now for what will really be a seismic change. And everything covered in the webinar is relevant today to get you ready. Before we go on, there's just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get into the session and a little bit more of what you can see in front of you. Those of you who have joined us before will be very familiar with this, but those who haven't, the screen you see is customizable, so you can drag and move the speaker and slide views to position them however you prefer to see them. You'll find speaker bios listed in the panel next to these, where you can read a little more about the panel speakers that are with us today. We've also, as always, tried to include some resources on the topics being discussed, which you can download during the session and which we'll send out to you after the webinar too. Lastly, but not least, there is a contact us button, so you can get in touch with us at any time during the session. And if you'd like to ask a question, there's a Q&A comment box at the bottom of the screen. Now, obviously, we are time-bound, but we'll try and answer as many questions as we can towards the end of the session. But if we don't get to them all, we'll follow up with answers after the webinar. So, let me introduce you to the rest of today's panel. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome one of the newest members of the Empowering People Group, Martin Cornforth, Director of Litigation. Martin joined our employment law company, Halborns, just a few weeks ago, and he brings with him extensive legal expertise and a real pragmatic commercial approach to employment law. He's also in the midst of his own probation period, so he can really speak with more authority than most on the topic right now. Thanks for joining us today, your first EPG webinar in your first month.
Yes, hi Simon, good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. I'm also delighted to be joined by Caroline Moore, who's Managing Director of Working Transitions, the career management and coaching specialist within EPG. Caroline is absolutely passionate about how people empowerment drives business success, and she's dedicated her career to developing practical and engaging coaching and career development solutions that really enable people to thrive.
Thanks, Simon, and hello, everybody.
So, as I briefly outlined, in this webinar, we'll be focusing on how transforming probation period management will help businesses prepare for the new Day 1 rights included in the Employment Rights Bill. The new law demands a significant shift in how probationary periods are managed, as well as clarity in contracts and an overhaul in manager training to clearly define the pivotal role line managers play in effective probationary period management. What we're going to try and cover today will not only help navigate the complexities of the new employment landscape, but also contribute to long-term organizational success and employee engagement. So let's get going. Martin, if I can start with you and a summary of what we know so far about the new Day 1 rights in the Employment Rights Bill, and why a great start to employment, along with positive probation periods, are so important to help reduce risks.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So the element of the bill that we're focusing on today is the new Day 1 rights for unfair dismissal. And this is a summary of what we know so far. So currently employees need 2 years service to bring an ordinary unfair dismissal claim. But when the new bill becomes law, this will become a Day 1 right. However, it does make several changes to help employers more easily in the early months of employment. And although full details have not yet been released, the government has introduced the concept of an initial period at the start of employment. So a bit like a statutory probationary period. And the government indicated that during this initial period, dismissal on performance grounds or something else related to the individual employee might well be fair. The employer would still need to follow a procedure, but it would be lighter touch at this stage. It's likely to involve inviting the employee to a meeting, explaining the concerns and allowing them the right to be accompanied. It's currently unclear how long the initial period will be for, but the government is going to consult about that, and we'll share a link to the consultation with you. But the government said they'd like it to be 9 months. It's also worth flagging at this stage that the initial period wouldn't cover dismissals related to redundancies and the like. And so an employer would need to follow the same procedure for all staff, regardless of length of service. However, the right to redundancy payment will still only accrue after 2 years' service. We don't yet know when these changes are going to take effect, but the government has made it clear that it won't be earlier than autumn 2026.
That's great. Thanks for the overview, Martin. So the impact of this is going to be really far-reaching, from preparation work for HR to, again, more responsibility on managers. So obviously, one of the things that occurs to me that is that we're talking about it not coming till a minimum of autumn 2026. You can see that people might be tempted to not do anything about it right now. Martin, at Howborns, what are we seeing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so we have inquiries at the moment as to whether we can anticipate some of the changes when we're reviewing policies. And I think the reason for that is because it may be a big cultural shift. And so reviewing the policies now means that the culture can kind of sort of be ready throughout the organization for when the changes come in. So it's not a sort of sudden change.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. Caroline, any thoughts on that?
Well, I absolutely think Martin's got a point, but it seems a bit counterproductive to not take action now. I appreciate that, these changes are being discussed. They potentially won't be coming in until 2026. But I think what we can be certain of is that there will be some kind of change. To the depth of change, yes, we don't know, but the more planning and preparation you can do now is going to put you ahead of the game when this change comes into effect, because it certainly will.
Yeah, and I think, obviously we're looking at it very much through the lens of protecting the organisation and grievances and things like that. But actually, I suppose also as a business, there should be a real focus on that probation period anyway. And so, yes, we might have to make some changes later, but I think you should look at your probation and say process and say, actually, is it really doing what we need it to do? Which is, at the end of the day, getting people that you want to be great in your business into the business in a really, really slick way that enables them to be successful. The grievance and the new laws are actually obviously something we need to take into account from a business perspective. But actually, what's more important is looking at it as well from do we have really robust processes that mean that we're getting the most out of, and as I mentioned all the time to people, it's really hard to find good people. So when you do find them, you want to make sure that you absolutely maximize the potential and the chances of them being a success within your organization.
I totally agree, Simon. And I think the emphasis is still very much on skills. People actually having the right technical skills to do a job, and not necessarily the level of emphasis and focus on the competencies and the behavioural side. And that's where things can go awry, and that's what happens. And, ultimately you can train and develop people from a skills point of view, but it is far more difficult to develop people from a behavioural point of view. So that values piece right at the outset and through that onboarding process, it should be a priority. And for many organisations, I just don't think it necessarily is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Martin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, when we're talking about looking at objective criteria when assessing performance, I think one of the tricky things with that at the moment, where there's less pressure to look at objective criteria, is that, sometimes someone may have a poor month with sales, for example, but what if that's just a random fluctuation? And if an employer's not sort of looked at the data over a longer period of time, such as during a probation period, they may actually find that they've been losing valuable staff by not looking at the data more carefully,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's excellent points. Thank you both for that. And I think before we get into the impact on managers, I'd like to share some insight that we have hot off the press from some analysis we've conducted internally. As part of our support for clients, we've been crunching some numbers on what impact these new day one rights could have on resource within HR teams. So as I'm sure you're all aware, we're experts in employee relations transformation, and we have a vast amount of data from across the client base that use our Empower case management technology. So we analysed probation tasks and applied some scenarios on the impact of the new day one rights. To be quite frank, the findings are eye-opening. Just looking at probation tasks alone, we anticipate an increase of up to 230% in employee relations tasks related to probation periods. If you then look at this in context of support to manage this uplift, we've estimated this will require a 13 to 15% boost in employee relations advisory resources if businesses don't do anything to transform the way they're working right now. So obviously, when you couple this with the cost increases from the increased NI and the minimum wage, this represents a perfect storm of challenge for HR and business leaders everywhere. We share more of this analysis following the webinar, so you can calculate the same for your business, but I think you'll agree that these figures help to illustrate the urgency with which HR teams need to prepare and find new and innovative ways to reduce costs and drive efficiencies. A vital part of relieving this pressure and mitigating the risk of probation periods being mismanaged is to empower managers. So, Caroline, can I bring you in here to talk about what you think this means for managers?
Absolutely. I think this is going to have a significant impact on all aspects of line management, from the point of a new hire joining the organisation, in assessing new hires during their probationary period to reduce the risk of unfair dismissal claims. However, there is growing concern about the rise of the accidental manager. These are individuals who are promoted based on technical skills but lack the necessary people management skills and experience. This issue needs to be addressed now to ensure that managers are better equipped and prepared for these up and coming changes. So when hiring, managers need to clearly define the hard and soft skills required for the role so they can evaluate applicants against specific criteria. It's also important for managers to discuss during the interview process the values, behaviours and expectations they're looking for, ensuring that there is alignment with the company's culture. And then once a new hire is in place, managers must have clarity on their role in assessing the new employee. Setting out a clear, structured onboarding programme will ensure valuable conversations aligned to the role are being had between the two parties. And therefore, managers must be developed to provide objective, constructive feedback, avoiding personal biases. As an example, if addressing a personality clash or challenging behaviour, managers should focus on specific behaviours impacting performance rather than subjective opinions. Managers can then make informed decisions about extending the probationary period or, if necessary, terminating the employment fairly, and at the same time protect the organisation from potential legal challenges. Without proper expertise, without proper planning and preparation, then the manager's ability to effectively onboard and assess new hires could significantly be impacted. So I think for organisations to mitigate the risk of any increase in unfair dismissal claims and ensure a smooth probationary period takes place, then comprehensive development programmes for all managers, regardless of experience, must be made available. And these programmes should cover topics such as effective communication, that's a given, emotional intelligence, unconscious bias, dealing with neurodiverse conditions, and of course, managing performance expectations.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Caroline. There's a point I'd like to develop there, which I think is really important. So I agree, being clear at an early stage how the employee will be assessed and the criteria to be applied will become very important. You're never going to get someone to perform if they don't know the job they're doing and they don't have the tools they need to succeed. And so it's important to outline and communicate clear accountabilities and objectives from the get-go. And coupling this with a straight talking policy, setting out what you expect from new starters, how their performance will be reviewed, and when it may be extended or failed are going to be key for setting up success. See, currently, there's little pressure on employers to dig deeper into their doubts about an employee. Those doubts might well be valid, but in the future, employers will need to produce evidence to show that they're valid. And that could be relatively simple. For example, if measurable criteria exists for something like sales figures, that may be simple, but other aspects might be more difficult to assess. For example, if an employee's attitude is poor or their relationships are difficult within the team, how would you assess that? So employers could potentially set something like teamwork as a criteria and find concrete examples to assess that, such as supporting, praising, or encouraging colleagues. And I think supporting managers to understand the importance of proactively and effectively managing probationary periods will be essential. But there's no reason to wait for the new bill to take effect. It's good practice to do that now. So often we're asked, for example, to support where an employee isn't performing, but the probation period hasn't long lapsed. And so there may have been a missed opportunity to fail the probation period, which can result in increased costs because of an increased notice period, for example, once the probation period's been passed. And that can lead to messier exits. But fast forward to when the Employment Rights Bill takes effect, there'll also be now the risk of unfair dismissal claims. And so getting into good habits now is vital.
Yeah, Martin, I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, I'm really passionate about the accidental manager topic we've touched on because so many managers I've come across, and in fact, in my own early career, just haven't been given the support to thrive as people leaders. And now this added responsibility adds even more pressure. So you're absolutely right. Businesses can't wait to start driving the change needed to be prepared for the new law. They need to do it now. Is there anything else we need to consider on this point?
Yeah, I think we also need to consider the impact of absence management during probation periods. I mean, this is currently one of the most common reasons for failing probation, and as with performance, employers will need to consider the process they follow for individuals during that initial period of employment, which, as I say, is likely to be 9 months. Again, that could be a lighter touch process, but there will need to be a procedure followed, which will probably include some sort of warning to improve attendance. But it's also important to ensure that contract terms and policies enable the employer to extend any probationary period for any periods of absence or leave, such as even family-friendly leave, to allow employers the best chance to properly review performance and capability.
I totally agree, Martin. I mean, they're really important points that demonstrate the need to improve manager training and increase capability. Now, as a bit of a technologist, I will always think tech first when it comes to improving processes and mitigating risks. So I'd like to just cover off some points here about the vital role technology can play in this. First and foremost, HR need to have the visibility of key metrics that can help to identify where there may be managers lacking experience in onboarding new hires. I have a really good example from one of our clients who use our Empower solution to manage their employee relations cases. And they shared with us how impactful analytics has been in identifying the root cause of capability issues within their manager cohort. They had a consistent issue with probation periods being extended within a particular team, and grievances were also high. They could see the anomaly in this team against benchmark data, and armed with this insight, they were able to investigate what might be at the heart of the issue. It was identified that this team was based in a location that had a more ethnically diverse workforce than other areas, and the line manager in the team was not adequately trained in his responsibility to create an inclusive working environment. Armed with this knowledge, they were then able to roll out an ED&I strategy that was implemented across the whole business. So my point here is that modern people teams need visibility of the wealth of insight into manager capability and the general culture and health of the organization that sits within employee relations data. Prioritizing employee relations digital transformation at this time will lay the essential foundations for when the new laws come into play. And for anyone who is interested in finding out more about this, there is a book a call button below, and we can share case studies with you after the session. Right, so let's dip back into the capability point, Caroline. Can you share more on how we can build a culture of empowerment and continuous learning to help improve that capability?
Of course, and a starting point is an up-to-date capability matrix, which is a powerful tool for building a culture of empowerment and continuous learning within any organization. So in the context of probationary periods, create a capability matrix that defines the hard and soft skills required for the role, and share this information with the new hire. And when this is in place, carry out a mapping exercise, working with that new hire, assess their skills against the matrix to show what their current capabilities and proficiency levels are. The output being a clear and visual representation of the skills and competencies required to do the role, and it will identify any gaps that may exist. This shared approach empowers individuals to take ownership of their personal and professional growth, and at the same time it reinforces a culture of continuous learning within the organisation. So now that you have any skills gaps and they've been identified, a targeted learning plan could be put in place, or can be put in place. And this approach allows for tailored learning opportunities, making the training much more effective and relevant. And as a result, it shows the new hire that the organisation is invested in their personal and professional growth, and it reinforces that culture of continuous improvement as well. Throughout the process, from a learning perspective, assess the progress and collaborate throughout the targeted learning journey that's being made by the new hire. Review the progress that's being made and identify any areas of concern and or success, and make sure that both are recognised. This approach will encourage collaboration, it'll develop trust, and will ultimately lead to increased performance. But if you're thinking about a capability matrix outside of the context of probationary periods, by having a broader capability matrix in place, an organisation will embed a culture of empowerment through ownership and growth. Employees can see the full spectrum of skills required for various roles and career progression within the company, and will feel encouraged to take charge of their own career paths and pursue growth. And when people feel they have the resources and support to develop, they are more likely to take initiative, contributing to a more empowered and engaged workforce. So in summary, for me, a capability matrix is instrumental in fostering an environment of empowerment and ongoing learning, and it ultimately leads to a more skilled and engaged workforce.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice, Caroline. It's also worth mentioning here that the draft legislation is currently unclear as to where constructive dismissal fits in. At this stage, it looks like any damage to trust and confidence by an employer could lead an employee to resign and claim constructive dismissal, regardless of length of service. So even in the initial period of employment, employers will need to take extra care to highlight to new employees the mechanisms in place for resolving disputes. Grievances in particular will need to be carefully assessed and a reasonable response provided to reduce the risk of constructive dismissal.
Okay, great. Thank you both. That's amazing guidance. And I think talking about the capability matrix, Caroline, I think the hard and the soft skills is a really important point there, because I think so often the soft skills are missed. And it's those that cause the problems during probation, not the hard skills that you probably really tested for going in. I suppose that's from a technology perspective, to be honest. I think that brings us to the end of the areas we plan to cover. So let's take a look at some of the questions that have been coming in. Firstly, I am going to read these. Firstly, there is an important one, as there's a lot to talk in the media about new day one rights. So the question is, how can HR teams effectively manage and communicate these changes to managers and new hires in the future? Martin, do you want to have a crack at that one?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the answer's multifaceted. So to effectively communicate and introduce new ways of working, HR teams, I think, will need to prioritize developing transparent communication and revising onboarding processes sooner rather than later. So clear and concise messaging, open dialogue, and regular updates will be crucial to ensure managers know their responsibility, and also employees understand how processes may evolve in the short to medium term while businesses prepare. Getting started on updating onboarding materials, consulting on adjusted probationary periods, enhancing training for managers and HR representatives, I think will be essential for a smooth transition. Also, potentially having employee and manager champions help shape those could ensure they're more effectively embedded by those most impacted. Potentially asking managers and recent new hires through surveys, for example, where they feel their skills might be lacking in managing probation periods, could help ensure that employers get the right provisions in place. And lastly, of course, you need to stay informed about legal developments and seek expert advice to ensure compliance and minimize legal risks by implementing these strategies. And we'll make sure we pencil in another webinar once we have more details to help simplify that for everyone.
Thanks, Martin. That's great advice. And yeah, we will keep everyone informed on the next webinar in the Labour Laws series. So the next question sounds like one for you, Caroline. I think managers could be quite resistant to the added pressures this adds to their day job. How can we change mindsets?
I imagine that might be a common theme, as many managers may have never been taught to effectively prioritise probationary periods before. And I'd say it again requires a multifaceted approach, like Martin covered. Clear and open communication is vital to effectively address potential resistance from managers. HR teams must prioritise education, support, and perhaps even incentives by clearly communicating the benefits of more diligent and positive probation periods, and providing comprehensive training. Managers can gain a deeper understanding of the changes and their positive impact on employee satisfaction, retention, and productivity. I think also streamlining processes, signposting support, and incorporating compliance into performance metrics can alleviate the burden on managers and incentivize their cooperation. I'd say that collaboration and recognition of managers' role in success can empower managers to embrace new ways of working.
That's great. Thanks, Caroline. And as a manager myself, I think also when I think about it, how difficult and time consuming it is to find great people for your business. I think that's another reason why managers would want to embrace this right now rather than waiting for 2026. So I think this may be one for both of you. The question is, I'm interested in the clashing personalities point we mentioned. How can we proactively protect against that? Martin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So I'm quite passionate about this. As I touched on earlier, to safeguard against potential bias that could arise from personality clashes, employers should establish clear and objective performance criteria during the probationary period that's directly linked to the job role. And that may involve maintaining detailed records of performance, including specific examples of achievements and areas for improvement. That will probably be crucial to support decisions and mitigate potential legal challenges. Also, providing managers with training on unconscious bias and effective performance management techniques could help identify and mitigate any potential biases. Regularly reviewing and updating probationary period policies may ensure fairness, equity, and alignment with legal requirements too. Is there anything you'd add to that, Caroline?
I agree with you, Martin. Addressing potential bias through training is essential. Employers should cultivate a workplace culture that encourages open communication and feedback between managers and employees. It's all about collaboration. Offering coaching and mentoring programs can empower managers to develop their interpersonal skills and absolutely be able to deliver constructive feedback effectively. So implementing structured performance review processes focused on objective criteria and specific performance examples absolutely can minimize the impact of personal biases. Promoting diversity and inclusion within the workplace can challenge stereotypes and reduce bias as well, such as training on areas like neurodiversity and microaggressions.
Absolutely. That is going to become even more important with the new day one rights, and everyone within organisations needs to be aware of their duty to create inclusive environments that reduce unconscious bias. Okay, so just looking at time, I think that's all we have time for now, but we will follow up with those we haven't got to yet. So the main takeaway I think I'd like to reiterate today is that the time for change is now. And manager empowerment is at the heart of successfully navigating what needs to change and ensure probation periods are effectively used to help mitigate risks. As we've touched on, all these changes will require updates and amendments to your policies and your training. And to help you get started, we have put together some new probation packs, which include lots of resources to ensure that you're well prepared in advance of the new law. The new pack includes a calculator to help assess the impact on caseload for your business, template letters, and guidance on managing performance, and some essential learning courses that will help set your managers up for success. We will be following up with more information on how you can get a copy of the probation packs, so look out in your inbox or answer the short poll you can see below in the presentation screen, and we'll get straight back to you. At the Empowering People Group, we're all about simple solutions to people challenges. So we're expertly placed to help with ensuring you're implementing all these changes in a compliant and consistent manner. If there's anything you'd like our help with that we've covered today, please get in touch using the contact form available on your screen, and we'd be delighted to chat through the solutions we have to get you where you want to be. Thank you both, Caroline and Martin, for your insights in the discussion today. I think we covered some great ground and probably could have carried on for more. But most of all, thank you again to everybody that's joined us. We look forward to seeing you all on another Empowering People Group webinar in the very near future. Thank you.